I had been a truck driver for several companies for 10 years, and 3 years earlier I had joined a Kansas warehouse company that did freight. I usually drove a large truck, and it was February 2nd, a cold Monday when the week had just begun with loads to be shipped. I started my trip at 3 p.m., determined to reach my destination that same night, without stopping on the side of the road to sleep. After midnight, I was about 5 units over the speed limit, which is dangerous for a large truck. I was exhausted, but my destination was less than an hour away, so I figured I could make it, despite my tired, heavy eyes. I splashed some water on my hands and rubbed it on my face, which helped me refresh a little. My truck was the only vehicle on the dark road, and the headlights revealed the lonely road. At that moment, as I was reaching for a sip of water, I almost spit it out when I saw someone approaching quickly from afar. I slammed on the brakes until the truck slowed down and I approached him, making out the features of this man who was standing in the middle of the road. He was dressed entirely in black with a black scarf wrapped around his neck, and his neck was abnormally long, but his face was blurred and did not reveal any details. As I slowed down and approached him, the idea occurred to me to open the window to ask him if he needed a ride, but to my surprise, the man turned to his left and took off straight into the forest. I did not stop to think. I pressed the gas pedal and resumed driving, driven by the urgency of completing my mission despite the strangeness of the situation. It was only 20 seconds before my heart began to beat rapidly from the intensity of surprise, and this feeling continued for a few minutes until I tried to control it. But things did not end there. After resuming my speed, I noticed something running across the road in front of me. At first it looked like a huge animal, but as it got closer and closer to the edge of the forest, I realized it looked like another person. I didn't hit the brakes this time, I just kept driving, maybe even pressing the gas harder, driven by a hidden panic and a desire to get away from the shadows. A few minutes passed without incident, but I was getting more and more tired, until I started to veer slightly into the next lane. With about 40 minutes left on the road, I wasn't sure if I could continue. I started looking for a safe place to stop and rest for a few hours. I finally found a small opening on the side of the gravel road, which I thought was intended for a small rest stop. I pulled the truck over to it, parked it, and got a short nap, no more than an hour, until I suddenly woke up in the dark. I don't know what woke me up, but when I looked out the windshield, something inside me felt the need to turn on the headlights, so I did so to light up the area around the truck. And then the impossible happened. I saw a man standing in front of the truck. It was the same man I had seen earlier, dressed in black and with a scarf around his neck, but this time his face was clearly visible. His smile was exaggeratedly wide, and his eyes were unnaturally wide, as if they were poking out from behind the windshield directly at me. In a state of shock, I started the truck and pulled it out of the rest area as fast as I could, not realizing how this man had walked nearly 10 miles from where I had first seen him. I did not stop again that night until I reached my destination. There, in the parking lot, I lay down to get some sleep until I woke up early the next morning. Now, whenever I think back on that night, the question lingers in my mind: was it just a hallucination caused by stress and fatigue, or did something supernatural really happen? I had never heard of a hallucination so vividly and terrifyingly, and the sight still leaves me feeling confused and frightened to this day. Before I landed an office job in the city, I spent 2 years driving for UPS. It paid well, and for the most part, I enjoyed the work, even though it had its share of odd moments. It was 2010, just 2 years after college, and I found myself working an 11 to 7 Thursday shift in the dead of winter. By around 5 p.m., darkness had already settled over my small North Carolina town, a far cry from the sunny image of Palm Springs. The neighborhood wasn't upscale by any means. Some blocks featured rows of houses and trailer homes spaced out by long distances, while others were nearly deserted. This unusual layout meant that my delivery routes covered vast areas, taking me through at least 3 different small towns in one day. After hours of crisscrossing these scattered communities, I headed down one particular street lined with widely separated trailer homes on one side and a dense forest on the other. It was just past 6 p.m., and with my shift winding down, only one delivery remained, a package that required a signature. I pulled up in front of a modest trailer home and retrieved one of the heaviest boxes of the day from the back of my truck. Inside, I could hear a jumble of small metal pieces rattling about. I had no idea what they could be. My task was simple: take the box to the front door. The house had no doorbell, so I knocked repeatedly. With no lights on and no car visible in the driveway, I hoped someone was home. Soon, I noticed the curtains in one window twitch and heard footsteps approaching the door. After what felt like an unnervingly long pause, the door slowly cracked open, revealing an older woman peeking out with a wary, almost paranoid expression. When I explained that I had a package for her signature, she reluctantly opened the door completely. Her signature was messy at best, and then, in an unexpected twist, she insisted I help carry the box into her home. I followed her inside, immediately overwhelmed by a strong, unpleasant odor, one that you don't easily forget. She led me through a tiny living room into a narrow hallway where I struggled to balance the heavy package. Finally, we reached a door which she opened and instructed me to push the box into a closet at the back of the room. I asked if she could turn on a light, but she replied that the light was broken, leaving the space nearly pitch black except for a faint glow seeping in from the living area. As I maneuvered the box into the closet, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the far corner. I was certain it was a person. The outline was unmistakable and there was subtle movement. There was no logical explanation for someone hiding there. Startled, I abandoned the box and, without a backward glance, excused myself with a curt "Have a nice day." The woman began yelling after me, even hurling insults, but I was already eager to leave that unsettling scene. That night, I made it home, and shortly afterward, I started looking for a better job. I've been a truck driver since I was 25 and have encountered my fair share of strange, late-night experiences. One such incident occurred during a long-haul delivery across California. I had been tasked with delivering a trailer loaded with wooden furniture items, and much of the route took me through barren desert roads. With few vehicles around and the road stretching straight for miles in the darkness, I found myself driving faster than usual. While on the road, I spotted the flashing red lights of a car far ahead. I braked hard, eventually pulling up behind an old Chevy Impala parked by the roadside, its hazard lights blinking. Concerned for the driver, I got out to check on the vehicle. I knocked on the window and peered inside the tinted glass, only to discover that the car was completely empty. I inspected all the seats and confirmed there was no one inside. Feeling compelled to help, I returned to my truck and fetched a heavy-duty tactical flashlight from my toolbox under the passenger seat, a flashlight so bright that looking directly into its beam was painful. When I turned it on, it illuminated an abandoned gas station off the road. I'd never noticed it before. Its fill-up area was nothing more than a dirt patch with 2 rusted gas pumps in a small building that looked like it had once been a quick-stop store. I approached the building's front door, which was permanently jammed open, and stepped inside. The flashlight revealed a large, empty convenience store with echoes that sent chills down my spine. I called out, announcing my presence and offering help, but only a faint echo replied. Then I heard a scrape, like a shoe dragging against the floor, coming from behind a few dusty shelves. I repeated my offer, only to be met by a deep, heavy whisper and the sound of labored breathing in a far corner. At that point, fear took over. I bolted out of the building, and as I hurried back to my truck, I was haunted by at least 5 seconds of disorienting, inexplicable sounds. I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I struggled to describe my location, an abandoned gas station on a remote desert road. While I was still on the line, I noticed a car speeding away in the distance, its driver unseen, as the darkness and my own distraction blurred my perception. Compelled by a need to know more, I returned briefly to the building, keeping 911 on the line. In the back section where I'd heard that unsettling voice and heavy breathing, I was horrified to find a fresh pool of blood on the floor. I could only imagine the grisly events that had just transpired. I explained to the dispatcher that I believed I had stumbled upon a crime scene. Soon enough, state troopers arrived to investigate. I provided them with what little information I could, a description of the car, a black Chevy Impala from the early 2000s, and fragments of overheard dialogue, including a man's command for me to leave and the sound of a woman screaming as they departed the building. No body was found, and although the police took blood samples, I wasn't of much further help. I regret not having a dash cam that day to capture the details, but I did install one the following week. That night, and the memories of it, remain one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences that still haunt me.